that exists is what you put your eye on, what you focus on, right? Number two, could there be backdrop people? And are these people real? How real are they? And if they are real, and it's possible that they're considered in this realm of psychopath, look how many psychopaths are in power. The backdrop people are running the world. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, that's frightening. That's really, really frightening. That's really interesting. I don't have much to add to that, but I did do some research today that I think broke my mind, just like you did there for a second. It made me think about my own consciousness, and it kind of ties into exactly what you're saying. So did you guys ever hear that only 26% of people have inner dialogue? You ever heard that before?
No, I've never heard that.
I haven't. I've heard about like the opposite end of that spectrum where people, and it happens a lot with actually pregnant women, the hormones go crazy and they have these intrusive thoughts, they're called, where it's like continual thoughts that kind of most of us have, but it's like, a continual like negative thought of like, oh, you need to go and do this. Like you need to go and
really
push that person or like steal this or like just interesting, like, yeah, really
that's
odd.
Crazy.
But it's not like an internal dialogue so much as it's just like these little these little quick little thoughts that pop into your head and in and out.
Oh yeah,
it's
that's a little different than this. I know what you're saying though. Yeah. This is like people actually narrate in their head as their day's going along. And okay, let me get into the research quick, and then I'll tell you how I feel. And you guys will actually probably analyze yourself and be like, "Wait, what do I do? Like, where do I fit in all this?" So this all started earlier in the year. This year, January 27th, there was a tweet from a guy named Kyle Plant Emoji. He said, "Fun fact: some people have an internal narrative, and some don't. As in, some people's thoughts are like sentences they hear, and some people just have abstract, nonverbal thoughts and have to consciously verbalize them. And most people aren't aware of the other type of person." That's an interesting sentence. You're not aware of the other person. So where did this come from? This tweet caught fire. Everyone was into it. It's actually kind of based off a 2011 study by a doctor named Dr. Russell T. Herbert, PhD. And he wrote an article in Psychology Today called "Not Everyone Conducts Inner Speech." So when I got into studying MPCs and background, this is the first place I went before I got to my second part here. But he basically gave 30 students, a beeper, and that beeper would go off every day. And right when the beeper went off, they'd have to like kind of explain what they were going through. He was looking to identify something he calls pristine inner experience. So what he found out when they did the studies, people would report what they were doing right before that beep went off in their head. Like, were they thinking? What were they thinking? How was it? And this is what he found. Subjects experienced themselves as inwardly talking to themselves in 26% of all samples, but there were large individual differences. Some subjects never experienced inner speech. Other subjects experienced inner speech in as many as 75% of the samples. The median percentage across subjects was 20%. So what that means is some people, and there's some great tweets out there, are constantly talking in their heads. Everything they're doing. All right, I should go to Costco. I got to go up there. What's going on upstairs? Should I make dinner? What's happening? They're constantly verbalizing. And some people don't do that at all. And
whoa.
Yeah, don't do that. Well, what is that saying? So I was researching MPCs, and I got into like, does that mean like everyone who doesn't have internal dialogue is an NPC? Because I do partially. Like I definitely do. I was so conscious of it all day. Once like it hit me weird. Like it shocked my reality. I was like, I was only thinking. I was disconnected from myself. I was thinking about my thinking. It was weird.
This is the type of thing that would just fuck up my day because I'd just be like, fuck, I'm doing it again.
Yes.
I gotta stop it.
Yes. And I didn't know how I felt about it. I'd be like, I'm not thinking. What does that mean? Is that good? Is that bad? What's happening? But what I found is I do it a lot, but I also think with intention or emotion, which is what other people do. So my question of like, if you don't think, are you an NPC? Don't worry, people out there. If you don't have a lot of thoughts in your head that are verbalized, doesn't mean you're an NPC. It just means you think differently. People think with images or intention or feelings or sometimes words or colors, or they think a sentence in their head, which I do a lot. Like I have an internal dialogue that's constantly driving, and I find it, especially when I'm future planning, like when we're preparing for the pod, I find myself rehearsing a little bit in my head what I'm going to talk about, and I kept tripping myself up because I'd be aware of myself saying it, and then I'd be disconnected. It was really, really strange. But long story short, it didn't lead to anything good, or it didn't lead to anything exciting about NPCs, but I did find a really interesting concept of NPCs that is parallel to what you were suggesting, Melissa. I found out there, but there is one commonality which I'll get to in the end, which is interesting. So. This is the concept that I found out there, and I saw a couple of YouTube videos, read a couple of articles, and found an author. The theory is that there's a lot less NPCs than you think. So, Melissa, you were talking about research that suggests that a large group of people all around us, these psychopaths, are NPCs, right? What this guy is talking about, the guy who wrote this book called My Big Toe. His name is Thomas W. Campbell. He wrote
What's
this
up
book.
with his toes?
I don't know. This dude has a toe fetish. This mother trucker.
I'm sure that's not it, but okay.
Yeah, no. Well, actually, it's a really amazing theory because what it's based on simulation theory. So again, like the background people discussion, the NPC discussion goes hand in hand with the simulation theory that all this is just a simulation, a matrix, which you've got at, Melissa. So, but it's a different take on it, which I thought was really, really interesting. So what's the point of a simulation? It's for, if you believe... I guess what I believe, you think it's a playground basically for consciousness to grow, our souls to grow, or whatever you want to call your soul, to learn and grow and evolve, and you reincarnate into the simulation over and over again until you get your point across. So what he's trying to say is that it doesn't make sense to have a lot of NPCs. Basically, he thinks the only time there's real NPCs is when someone experiences extreme trauma that's not helpful, because extreme trauma isn't really helpful in the global simulation theory that we're here to evolve ourselves. There's a certain amount of trauma that's good for you, that you go through, that makes you grow. But there's a certain amount, like horrible abuse, horrible pain, horrible things that are no good. So what he's claiming, and I haven't read the book, so I haven't seen the evidence on it, this is just overall theory, that sometimes kids and adults, when they experience extreme trauma, their consciousness is sucked away, and then an NPC or a computer program that simulates them or goes into their body, so they can avoid the horrible trauma. And if you go into psychology, a lot of psychologists say, like, you know how people with extreme trauma block it out, they don't remember it, and they remember it later in life. Right before someone dies, if they think they fall off a cliff and they don't die, they usually black out right before, and they wake up, they're like, oh, I blacked out. So people like avoid, like your consciousness avoids extreme pain. Like it just shuts off.
Isn't that the whole kind of theory behind that trauma-based mind control that
like
MK Ultra,
creating
alters in your personality by doing extreme trauma on someone, and then they basically blank out, and then it creates another, basically what you're saying, another NPC or another altered personality.
That's interesting. You're right. I didn't think about that. That's really cool, actually. So there's no proof of this, but what I thought was cool that you talked about, Melissa, is like the psychopaths are put here to push us to grow. You know, that was interesting what you said. So I could see that actually being another part of it. But I just thought this guy was interesting, and it also gave me a peace of mind that, like, you really can't experience a certain level of pain and drama. Like you get cut off from it. Not to say people have terrible pain and trauma out there. I'm not trying to say that doesn't happen, because I've experienced extreme pain in my life. But there's a certain point you can't take it anymore, and you just get cut off, which is cool. Whether or not that means an NPC gets placed in you, and the next thing you know, you're walking around like, you know, organic robot, I don't know, but I just thought it was a cool take on the NPC world.
That is pretty cool. It also plays into Dolores Cannon's idea that these people are energy and they are alive, but their souls are slaves to the system. That would make sense with this guy's theory that once I think what he's saying, if your soul leaves for too long, then a computer program comes in, you become slaves to the program.
Oh, yeah. I like that, yeah.
Because that kind of fits into her theory of what background people are. They're slaves to a system.
Right on.
Yeah, it's when you think about those people who just kind of, again, like, it's like this hugely judgmental view on, like, people who just, like, live what we would consider to be a very mundane life, where they wake up in the morning and they have breakfast and they go to work and they come home and then they go to sleep and then they get up in the morning and they just, you know, it's like that. I don't know. It just, like, that's kind of what
dumb people aren't NPCs. You know, like,
right? Yeah.
Like they're just, some people are smarter than others.
They're just
that
dum-dums.
That just seems like intellectual elitism. That's all that is.
Yeah, that's just being a dick. That's just trying
people
to find
allowed to be-
separatism in spirituality, which is the complete opposite of what the whole purpose is.
Right. Maybe those people are psychopaths and they're the real NPCs.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
Drop the mic.
Oh, boom.
That's why I kind of got off onto a bit of a tangent when I started looking into this, because I started listening to people talk about background people, and it was a whole lot of like, oh, that's just people who are on a lower vibrationary plane who haven't been meditating with their crystals enough in the moonlight, and they're just not on my level right just yet.
That's my Tuesday night.
I was just like, ugh, you piece of shit. Like,
How dare they?
yeah.
All right, man.
Well,
Well, I
Matt-
can't wait to break it down right after the break, son.
All right, let's go to a break, and I'll come back and we'll talk about the crazy tangent I went on.
Woo! All right, Matt. What did you dig up? What did you find that was dark and scary?
Oh boy. Well, so I went down this path of it wasn't that it wasn't interesting, the background people for me, but I thought of it more as like, oh man, like it's like too many people have too many opinions on what this is, and it's kind of like super nebulous and hard to pin down. And then it sort of started getting me thinking about what could it be if there were just kind of these odd humans in the background that are trying to blend into the background for a reason, not just because they're, NPCs in the Matrix, but they're here for more nefarious shit. Right?
Okay.
So strap in, folks.
You're not about to get alien hybrid on me,
Yeah,
are you?
that's right, I am.
Oh,
Well,
shit.
picked it like a dirty nose. Well done. So,
So gross.
so I went to the works of Dr. David Jacobs, right?
Okay.
And
okay.
so
I'm
he's
in.
this, he's this guy. We've chatted about him. Like, I think we brought his name up like randomly here and there on a few different podcasts. But he's this guy that has been. He used to work with Bud Hopkins, the old UFO researcher.
Yep, very familiar.
And he does a lot of these kind of hypnotic reviews of memories that have been blocked for whatever reason of UFO abductions. People who believe that there's some weird shit going on in their life, and they do these hypnotic regressions. Is that the word I'm looking for? Anyway, they do hypnosis, and they kind
Close
of
enough.
Yeah, they take them back to the point where they relive this experience that they have. So he's been doing this for a long time. I'm pretty sure he's still alive. He's an old man now, but his book, the book that I have, I'd started reading it. It kind of freaked me out, so I stopped reading it. It's called it's called Threat. So
Ooh.
gives you a pretty good idea of what he's talking about. But
Sounds like light reading.
yeah, so he's interviewed and hypnotized and try and get the stories out of like thousands of people now, I think, because he's been doing it since like the early 90s, about what turns out to be their abduction. So they get abducted by aliens.
Whoa.
And it was like a continuing story. So we've talked about it before, like, why would aliens continue to abduct us? Like, what is the point of that? How much can they learn from doing it thousands of times over and over and over again?
I know. How many butts do they need to probe, Mr. O'Connor?
Right. How many butts you need to probe
Yeah, exactly.
before you get this right?
What is in the butt that's so good?
I don't know.
So his impression after I don't know how many thousands of these is that it's not that they're trying to learn. They know everything they need to know from us. It's all about reproduction. Every one of these people that he has, these abductees that he's regressed hypnotically, have all talked about how some sort of sexual reproduction thing. If it's a male, they talk about taking sperm from him. If it's a female, they talk about not only like harvesting eggs or whatever, but also remembering becoming pregnant and then not having a baby anymore, and all sorts of like crazy shit.
Damn.
So his basic like view, and I'll just jump into his like endgame hypothesis before we get into the reasons why. His basic view is that people are getting abducted, and human alien hybrid babies are being born of these people, and there's this whole like infiltration of the human race